Reddit on Reddit on Reddit.
Has anyone had a teacher do something so terrible you will never forget it?
My grade 2 teacher asked my mother if I was retarded. Yes, she actually used that word, because one time I dropped a ball I was trying to catch and I giggled out of embarrassment. This old crone said to my mother's face that I would never amount to anything and that I needed to get tested for brain damage. I was at a new school the following week. That teacher was forced to retire a few years later. After I changed schools, half my class left too for the same reasons. Before class each day, she would go around and point out a physical flaw on each child. Absolute bully.
My 6th grade history teacher would clip his toenails in class. Now I have a foot phobia.
I went to a high school that had a uniform. We were supposed to have our shirts tucked in at all times. I was walking into English class, between bells, tucking in my shirt because it came up out while I was taking my cardigan off. My English teacher stopped me and asked, "Were you just tucking your shirt in?" I told her I was and she promptly wrote me up for having had my shirt untucked. It was utterable and I'll never forget.
In my high school we had to tuck our shirts in unless it was a sweater. I even went and made sure with the teacher it was okay and she said, "Why would you tuck a sweater in?" A few weeks later she wrote me up for not tucking in my sweater. Wench, set me up.
My teacher gave me a C on a project where we were supposed to decorate masks. Everyone else got mostly A's. Like, how the hell do you even grade something that is supposed to be artistic anyways? Mine was simple because I didn't have much money to spend on decorating it, but to this day I still believe it was better than the sparkly garbage some kid turned in.
Anyone have any examples of stupid school rules they experienced?
We had room E8. E8 was the room that detentions took place in. Detentions in high school for people that breached the uniform policy. This included having to wear white socks and black shoelaces. You lost half your lunch for having the wrong color socks. There were a number of quite poor people in my school, including me, who wore whatever shoes and socks we had. Many people would get E8s then not go, which would lead to getting a real detention. However, if you didn't go to the E8 you weren't going to go to the real detention. When you didn't show up to the real detention, they called your parents. How many parents do you think punished their kids for not going to a detention for wearing the only pair of shoes they owned? What the buck?
My mom's school gave everyone a dress code. This was in the middle of downtown Cleveland. They gave my mom's friend a too small shirt. She also was assigned a top locker right outside of the English teacher's room, who happened to be a bitch. This girl worked 2 jobs to pay for her tuition since her parents were both major alcoholics, who never did anything and always blew the budget in booze. She got in trouble every day because her shirt was too small. Every day, after a certain number of demerits, or whatever it was they were called, she had to have her parents come in. Well, her parents didn't show up because they were dead drunk. She almost got expelled because you can't pay for your own tuition. That is ridiculous. Long story short, the next year they didn't have a one-size-fits-all assignment of blouses.
Not a rule but a story of stupidity. One time I opened like 50 Firefox windows and the IT person at my school was so dumb she thought it was broken. The next day there was a note on it that said this computer is out of order because a student intentionally damaged it.
50 windows though? I mean, you were obviously trying to break it.
Nah, it was just really slow and I got impatient and I clicked it a bunch.
I'm a history teacher and in my class there's this little prick that always makes a lot of noise, keeps touching and messing with other kids and employees and makes mean, racist jokes about everyone. He is constantly trying to make my life, and the life of his classmates hell thinking he is funny or something. In a nutshell, he is a bully. Yesterday he destroyed his group project, causing everyone in his group to fail. Although I'm giving more time for the rest of his group to remake all of their lost work. I already tried calling his mom. The bitch defends her precious son that would never do such bad things. He's such a sweetie. Today I was walking to the teacher's room to grab my coffee and I saw the kid being dragged to a corner. I knew what was going on the moment I saw it and I just ignored what I saw and kept going my way.
Talk smack, get smacked. Our sex ed teacher taught us sexual health as per Catholic doctrine, and also peppered in some of her own weird, personal viewpoints, shaped by her own history, I guess. We had this box at the front of the class where we could discreetly write down and drop off the questions we were too nervous to ask out loud. Someone asked what orgasms feel like for women. We knew men ejaculate, but what do women do? Mrs. M did not explain, perhaps because she hadn't had one a day in her life. She said, the women's orgasm is not a necessary part of sex. It is not necessary for procreation, and sex is for the purposes of procreation.
I was bored during a Zoom class in quarantine, so I decided to do the nasty with myself to pass the time. Little did I know my mic was not on mute like I thought. The professor and the rest of my class loved hearing Bridget B take a pounding. Anyone ever have any traumatizing school experiences?
I was once told I had broken a computer and felt scared using a computer ever since. 17 years married to a very talented software developer and 15 years in a technical role, and I only just have my confidence back.
Anyone have school drug stories?
They thought I was doing coke in class at the age of 14, still bitter about that 5-day in school suspension.
I had a substitute who was convinced I was shooting up heroin in class. I was 12. Now what kind of 12-year-old is stupid enough not to do it in the bathroom?
To be fair, my school had this actually happen. A classmate of my sister. Rich teens are wild.
One year there was this 13-year-old in my class who got suspended for smoking pot on the track during school. I mean, at least go off campus to avoid getting a consequence, but no, too cool for that.
In my high school we had kids getting caught for selling pounds of weed in the bathrooms. This was a private school too.
Pounds. LMAO. What the buck?
When I was growing up, the richest private schools had the worst drug problems and everyone just turned a blind eye cause their parents were stacked.
My boyfriend went to the worst school in his city, right down the road from the private school. The private school kids would solicit kids walking to the public school to sell drugs for them. They would also pimp girls. He's told me more than one story about him being called over while walking to school by some private school kid wondering if he would sell something for them. Being rich doesn't stop you from being an asshole.
For us it was Adderall. Some kids with prescriptions set up a little black market for them.
A girl in my school tried to smuggle in weed in her sock. She was expelled immediately, and this was probably a month into secondary. Never knew her. Apparently she was a wench.
I was on my phone in class reading a Reddit story about a person who glued their butt cheeks together, and of course I had a huge grin on my face and was trying desperately not to laugh as I was reading more of the details. My professor suddenly hit me with the classic "why don't you share with the class what you find so funny?" Since the class was huge I became very embarrassed and tried to defuse the situation with nothing. It didn't work and the teacher kept pressuring me to make me uncomfortable. I had no choice, so I decided to briefly describe what I read. I was laughing at a story on Reddit of this guy gluing his butt cheeks together. My teacher was shocked and the class started dying. I was then asked to leave class and I'm sure my professor hates me now. And I asked our teacher, creationist, strict literal interpretation of the Bible, if Adam and Eve were the only people on earth until they had kids, who did Cain marry when he got exiled for killing Abel? You could have heard a pin drop. I was then asked to go outside and sit in a chair in the hallway until church. Never did get an answer.
I had a student, in my middle school biology class, ask why if Eve was created from Adam's rib did she have 2 X chromosomes instead of XY. I told him I was not qualified to teach anything beyond biology and perhaps he should ask in his Sunday school class. Since he had mentioned going there, he came in the following week very happy to tell me he had been thrown out of religion class for asking the question. He was the type of student I loved to teach, curious and not afraid to ask anything.
Big props to librarians. I don't think many people actually realize what it is that librarians do.
Yes, as a librarian, my heart dies a little when my own father comments that all I do is shelve and check out books. I work in acquisitions department at university library. No, I do not shelve or check out books. Oh Dad, there is so much more to being a librarian than shelving books.
Your dad was right, and you were pathetic. Stop trying to glorify the work of a librarian.
That was harsh.